I used to believe betrayal was a sudden event, loud, unmistakable, impossible to ignore. I've since learned it's often quiet. It starts in the silence between conversations, in glances that last too long, and in borrowed things never returned. My story didn't begin with a fight. It began with car keys and the woman I once called my sister. Naomi and I met when we were 8. She moved in next door with wild hair and scraped knees, and we bonded over tree forts, whispered secrets, and a mutual dislike for math. We grew up in each other's homes. Her mother became a second mom to me. I was her anchor when her parents divorced. She was my loudest cheerleader when I got into university. By the time we hit our 30s, our lives were so intertwined that people often assumed we were related. I married Gavin when I was 29. He was quiet where Naomi was wild, composed where she was chaotic. He had the kind of calm energy that felt like safety. We met at a bookstore. I was buying a gift. He was looking for a rare edition of a classic thriller. He asked for my opinion. We ended up grabbing coffee, and 5 months later, we were engaged. It felt fast, but right. Naomi adored him immediately. Too much in hindsight. They hit it off effortlessly. She teased him like she'd known him for years. At the time, I chalked it up to her charm. Naomi could get along with anyone. But sometimes, the way her hand lingered on his arm during conversations, or how she always seemed to sit just a little too close during dinner started to scratch at something uncomfortable in me. I never said anything. I didn't want to be that insecure wife. And besides, I trusted them both. Completely. Gavin never gave me a reason not to. He was consistent, loving, maybe a bit distracted at times, but never cruel. Our life was simple, stable. He worked in IT consulting, which meant long hours and the occasional late-night emergency. I worked in nonprofit management, often immersed in projects that left me drained but fulfilled. We had a rhythm, an understanding. Or so I believed. It started small. Naomi would drop by to bring me lunch when I was working from home. If I wasn't there, she'd chat with Gavin instead. She started borrowing things, cookbooks, chargers, a coat. Once, she borrowed Gavin's car when hers was in the shop. I thought nothing of it at the time. The first jolt of suspicion came from an unlikely place. Mrs. Hadley, our elderly neighbor, stopped me one afternoon as I was unloading groceries. "You must have come back early from your trip," she said, squinting. "I saw Naomi leaving your place the other night, late, maybe close to midnight." I frowned. I wasn't home. I was in Baltimore for a conference. Her face wrinkled in confusion. Then I must have been mistaken. I laughed it off, but that evening, I asked Gavin about it. He looked up from his laptop, blinked, and shrugged. "Yeah, she mentioned she forgot her charger and came by to get it." He said it so casually I believed him. Still, something shifted after that. A low hum of doubt began vibrating in the back of my mind. I began to notice things, small inconsistencies. Naomi's texts, which once had full stories and jokes, became vague. "Busy day," she'd say. "Exhausted. Let's catch up later." Gavin was always tired lately, too. When I asked if everything was okay, he'd offer a thin smile and mutter something about work stress. Then came the night that still lives in the pit of my stomach. It was a Thursday. I'd come home late from a fundraiser event and couldn't sleep. The house was still, the kind of stillness that makes every creak of the floorboard echo like a scream. At around midnight, I padded barefoot into the kitchen for a glass of water. As I passed the front window, movement caught my eye. I pulled back the curtain. Naomi, standing in the driveway, holding Gavin's car keys. She wasn't moving toward the car. She was just standing there, her eyes scanning the house like she was waiting for something or someone. Her coat was thrown over a thin dress, and her heels were off, dangling from her fingers. She didn't see me watching. My pulse spiked. I opened the front door quietly. The cold hit my skin like a slap. "Naomi," I called. She jumped. Her eyes widened like she'd seen a ghost. "Isla, I didn't think you'd be up." I stepped onto the porch, arms crossed. "What are you doing here?" "With Gavin's keys." She looked down, then back at me, forcing a laugh. "Oh." He asked me to grab something from the car. "A file for work." Said he needed it in the morning. At midnight. Her smile faltered. He forgot to mention it earlier. It's urgent. I stared at her. The silence stretched. Naomi was many things, carefree, impulsive, even reckless. But she was never a good liar. She handed me the keys. You should ask him, she said quietly. He'll explain. I took them without a word. My hands were trembling, though I pretended otherwise. She walked back to her car barefoot, not even bothering to slip her heels back on. I watched her drive away, the cold biting through my skin, and I didn't move until her taillights disappeared. When I turned around, Gavin was standing at the top of the stairs. He didn't say a word. Neither did I. But in that heavy silence, everything I'd refused to see came into focus. Gavin didn't speak right away. He stood frozen on the staircase, his expression caught somewhere between panic and calculation. I could see his chest rising and falling, not rapidly, but carefully, controlled, like someone preparing for a performance. I can explain, he finally said. I didn't answer. I turned and set his car keys on the hallway table. The metallic clink echoed too loud in the quiet house. The tension between us filled every corner. She said you asked her to get something from your car. I said, my voice low. I did, he replied too quickly. I left a client folder in the back seat. I was in bed already and didn't want to go out. You sent my best friend to your car at midnight for a folder? Gavin stepped down a few stairs. She was already here. We were talking. She mentioned she was leaving, and I asked if she could grab it on her way out. Convenient.
His jaw tightened. What do you mean by that?
I turned to face him fully. You're a good liar, Gavin, but not quite good enough. He descended the final steps and stood across from me in the hallway. You're overreacting, Isla. You know how Naomi is dramatic, always doing things in the weirdest ways. Don't let her strange behavior plant doubts. A few months ago, that line would have worked. I would have laughed, agreed, chalked it up to Naomi's eccentricity.
But not now.
Not after I'd seen her face, how startled she was, how guilty. I stepped back. I want the truth, not another performance. He ran a hand through his hair and exhaled. There's nothing going on. His voice was even. Too even. I watched him closely. Why her? His eyes flicked up. What? If you were going to betray me, why her? Gavin's composure cracked, just for a second. A flicker of something passed over his face. Regret, maybe. Or fear. I haven't betrayed you, he said, softer now. Naomi and we just talk sometimes. She understands things you don't. Like what? Like stress. The pressure. The constant expectations. I stared at him. So, you confide in her instead of your wife? He didn't respond. I moved past him, into the living room. The walls felt like they were pressing in. The family photos, the worn couch we picked out together, the throw blanket Naomi gave us for our anniversary, it all mocked me. How many times had she sat here, laughing with me, knowing what she was doing behind my back? He followed. Isla, nothing physical happened. The word sat heavy in the air. I hadn't asked, which meant he was trying to get ahead of something. I turned to him slowly. So, it's emotional then? He paused. And in that pause, I got my answer. I sat down on the edge of the couch. You fell for her? No, he said quickly. It wasn't like that. It's just she was there. You've been so busy. Distant. I looked up at him, my voice colder now. I was distant because I was trying to build something for us. To hold things together. You could have come to me. Talked to me. I didn't want to make it worse, he mumbled. I shook my head, a bitter laugh escaping. So you leaned on my best friend instead. The word best tasted foul now. She had been part of our wedding vows. Our memories. And now, she was part of our undoing. Gavin sat across from me, elbows on knees, head in his hands. He didn't look like a man trying to save his marriage. He looked like a man who'd already surrendered to whatever this was. When did it start? I asked. He looked up, reluctant. A few months ago. After your mother got sick. You were gone a lot and Naomi came by more. My stomach twisted. So, while I was caring for my dying mother, you were starting something with her? It wasn't planned, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I stood abruptly. I need air. I walked out the front door, ignoring his calls behind me. The cold bit at my skin again, but this time I welcomed it. It reminded me I was alive, awake, no longer sleepwalking through this illusion of safety. I stood on the porch, staring out into the quiet neighborhood. The same one Naomi and I used to roam barefoot as kids. The same driveway where she used to race me on our bikes. That familiarity now felt like poison. Everything between us, every shared memory, had been rewritten in an instant. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from Naomi. I didn't mean to hurt you. Please let me explain. I stared at the screen for a long time, then locked it without replying. Inside, I could hear Gavin pacing. Maybe rehearsing more half-truths. Maybe wondering if I'd leave. I didn't know yet. But what I did know, with chilling clarity, was this. Nothing about my life was untouched anymore. Not my marriage. Not my friendships. Not even my sense of self. I'd been living in a house of mirrors, reflections of what I wanted to see, not what was truly there. As I stood in the dark, I whispered to myself the truth I hadn't wanted to face until now. They chose each other. And no matter how many excuses they gave me, that choice had consequences. 3 days passed. 3 days of silence thick enough to drown in. Gavin slept in the guest room. I didn't ask him to, he simply did. Maybe out of guilt, maybe because he knew his presence in our bed would feel like a betrayal on top of betrayal. I didn't care. The truth had hollowed out everything between us. Words were useless now. I didn't respond to Naomi's texts. Her last message had been a voice note, her tone cracking with emotion. I didn't press play. I couldn't stomach hearing her voice. On the 4th day, she showed up at my doorstep. I opened the door to find her standing there in an oversized hoodie, hair pulled back, face pale. For a second, we were kids again. Naomi showing up at my house after a fight with her mom, eyes brimming with unspoken pain. But the nostalgia faded fast. This wasn't a childhood squabble. This was war damage. I shouldn't have come, but I can't leave things like this, she said. I leaned against the doorframe. You left things like this the moment you decided to sneak around with my husband. Her eyes welled. I never meant for it to happen. It started with talking. We were both lonely. Lonely. I laughed bitterly. You had me. Always. And he had me too. I was here. You just had to look. She took a cautious step closer. You were gone. Dealing with your mom. You were shutting everyone out. I flinched. So you took advantage of my grief? No, she said quickly. It wasn't like that. I wasn't trying to replace you. But you did. My voice sharpened. You replaced me in my own marriage. In my own home. Naomi's face crumpled. It wasn't physical, not really. Just a kiss once. But it was more about the connection. I didn't plan to fall for him. There it was. Fall for him. The words rang out like a bell toll. A confession I hadn't heard from Gavin's lips, but one I now had confirmed. I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. Naomi, you were my family. The person I called when I got my promotion. The one I cried to when Gavin proposed because I was scared of how fast it was moving. You were in every part of my life. And now you're in the worst part too. Tears streamed down her face. I wish I could undo it. I wish I could go back. You can't. I shook my head slowly. The version of me who trusted you both, that woman's gone. She looked at me, devastated. But I had nothing left to offer her. I'm not the villain you think I am, she whispered. No, I said, my voice steady. You're worse. You're someone I loved. She turned and left, shoulders shaking, and I didn't watch her go. I walked back into the house and locked the door. Later that evening, Gavin tried again. He stood in the kitchen doorway, a cup of coffee in hand. The same ritual he used every time he wanted to pretend we were fine. I made your favorite, he said softly. I glanced at it. You don't get to make my favorite anymore. He put the cup down and leaned against the counter. I want to fix this. How do you fix betrayal? I asked. Is there a manual? A reset button? He didn't answer.
I talked to her, I said.
He froze. She admitted the kiss. He closed his eyes. I didn't want to hurt you, but you did. He nodded slowly, a shadow of guilt darkening his face. I made a mistake. A terrible one. But I never stopped loving you. I studied him for a long moment. You know what I've learned this week?
What?
That love isn't always enough. Not when it's laced with lies. He came toward me, stopping a few feet away. I'll go to therapy. We can work through this. You don't even fully own what you did. I do, he insisted. I know I broke your trust. No, Gavin. You broke us. And in that moment, the final thread that held us together snapped. I turned away. I need time.
And space.
Alone. He nodded, but his shoulders sagged with resignation. I'll stay with a friend. I didn't stop him. When the door closed behind him, I sat in the quiet. This time, it didn't suffocate me. It was clean.
Honest.
The first breath of fresh air after a storm. That night, I went through my phone and deleted every photo of the three of us. Every caption filled with fake smiles and promises that now rang hollow. I archived our wedding album. I put away the gifts Naomi had given me. I created space where their presence used to live. Not out of hate, but to make room for healing. Grief, I realized, wasn't just for the dead. It was for the living too, the parts of them we lose, the pieces of ourselves they take when they leave. I didn't know what would come next. But I knew this. I would no longer make excuses for people who chose to abandon me when I needed them most. I would no longer build bridges for people who lit matches on the way out. Some betrayals don't need confrontation. They need closure. And sometimes, the strongest act of love is letting go.